Okay, so today we are actually going to talk about logging, and this is the only slide that I'm going to read to you verbatim. I promise it's the only one. Logging is the most arcane standard library module you'll probably ever have to deal with, and I do apologize for the text size. That's probably a little difficult to read. So, want to touch on a couple things before we leave this. I want to look at kind of the history of the logging module and why we need it in the first place. So just as a standard disclaimer before we start, this is aimed as a beginner talk. We're not going to talk about anything awesome and super cool, just why you need to use it. Trust me. So logging. The logging module is reasonably old, actually. It debuted in Python 2.3. And one of the reasons that, well, there are two main reasons, actually, why it has a really good reputation as being kind of a pain in the butt to work with. And the first is that it is old, but it was designed as a drop-in module for Python 1.5. So even though it debuted in 2.3, they put the module up, and it's like, here, you can just drop it in whatever the heck you want, and it'll work. The other is that the logging module is incredibly flexible. You can do a crazy, ridiculous number of things with the logging module. It will maybe even brush your teeth and make you waffles. It's really crazy. So, why do we actually need it? And I know this is kind of a basic question, but I would be willing to bet that most of us in this room started with print statements. And by started with print statements, I mean we loaded print statements into a metaphorical shotgun, aimed it at our projects, and pulled the trigger, and hoped that we were able to pull information out of the debris when it was done. Like, here are all of these print statements. I think that's the piece of information I need. That looks familiar. We'll go with that. And, you know, that's totally okay. I certainly did that, and as a show of faith, and a show of trustworthiness to you all, I would like to present what I pulled out of one of my first programs, all right? This was about 3 months after I started learning Python, and I thought, print statement's not gonna cut it anymore. Nuh-uh. I gotta be more professional than that. I gotta actually, like, put effort into this. I wrote that, and I was very proud of it. I was like super proud of that. I thought I was hot stuff because I managed to build my own logging system. And I was so close. Like, I even had like the function names. I was so close. If I had just known that there was a thing that I could have used. And there is a thing that we can use. So it worked. It wasn't gorgeous, but it worked. It let me figure out what I wanted to do. It let me assign values to what I thought was important, what I didn't think was important, and it allowed me to just kind of work that way. That was helpful. But if we use the logging module, we can actually replicate this in one fewer lines. And it looks like this. We have import logging, and that does a whole bunch of crap that I'm actually going to touch on in a second. And then we have our actual, like, severity levels. So there are 5 severity levels in the logging module. We have debug, info, warning, error, and critical. Fun fact, we actually have 6, but the 6th is fatal, and that's actually a Python 1 backwards compatibility thing. So if you use logging.fatal, it'll just redirect to critical. But that's not important, and none of you care. So this is the basis of, you know, your general logging stuff. You can totally use the logging module just like this, and nobody's going to bat an eye. However, there are a few things that you should know. The first is that when you import logging, because it's an old module and because of the way that it's built, it makes a whole bunch of assumptions about you as a programmer and about what your program is actually wanting when you use the logging module. The first is that you don't want any useful information in the output. That's the first assumption that it makes. That's wrong. The second assumption that it makes is that you only want to see things that are going wrong. So in this example, if we were to plug this into an interpreter and run it, The only thing that we're actually going to see is the warning, because it assumes by default that you don't want to see debug and info because clearly it's already working. Why else would you use it? So if we were to run this just as it sits right now, it would look like this. This would be our sole output. And if I do say so myself, I feel like we've kind of regressed in terms of usable information. We have the actual error level on the left. We have root, which root is the technical name of the logger itself. If you're running this inside of a script, then it'll be your script name there. But essentially, that's useless information for us right now because we already know what our program is named. Like, we don't need to have that in every single message. And then we have our lovely actual message that we passed in as an argument. Excuse me. So this is not tremendously useful. We have it. It's here, huzzah. But overall, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So the next thing that I'd like to introduce you to is a piece of the logging module called basic config. I will point out, this is in camel case. This is mildly irritating. So the basic config takes in a whole bunch of options. Like seriously, dozens and dozens of options. This is actually a tremendously powerful little function. But for the purposes of time, and that I'm already a third of my way through my time, we're only going to take a look at two of them. The first one is level, and the second one is format. So this is what that looks like, and in order to get the font this large, I have to do screwy things with the formatting. So I'm terribly sorry, please forgive me. At least it's still valid Python. So there are a couple things on here that I want to point out. The first is in format. So when we pass in a format string to the logging module, we're passing it a set of functions, or a set of variables that it and only it cares about. And these functions are never ever seen again, or these variables are never ever seen again. And it's mildly irritating. But don't mind the square brackets, those are me. The important part is that we have a percent sign, open paren, and then the name of the variable that logging is expecting, end paren, and the letter S. Those of you who have been in Python for a while already know how this system works. But what this is doing is allowing the logging module to give us information that we did not put in. The important thing in logging, just as a general note, or general sense really, is that we want to get out more information than what we put in. Because we can say that, okay, this exploded. Well, that's great, now I know that it exploded. But you know what else would be really helpful to know? When did it explode? That would be nice. And yeah, we can totally build that ourselves if we want to, but it's already built in here, we can use that, it's snazzy. So ASC time is gonna give us a timestamp, which is super awesome. Then level name is essentially the info, warning, debug, all that good stuff. And then the message is the string that we pass in as the argument. So that's the first part. I'm almost done. Now we move down to level. And this is actually the first major pain point that a lot of beginners have when they first start interacting with the logging module. Because you'll notice that level is logging.info, but this time info is in all caps. Because, you know, they wanted to. So the lowercase is always going to be the function that you call in order to actually trigger that severity level. And the uppercase is an integer. In this case, it's 20, but again, no one cares. So in this case, what we're doing is we tell the logging module that we want it to act a specific way. We want it to format our messages, and we want it to give us everything that is info level and above. You'll remember that by default, it only gives us warning and above. So this way, we're getting a little bit more information. This is actually how my personal scripts are set up, and I find it very useful to have for like file logs and that kind of stuff. All right, this is the part where I don't remember where my next slide is. That's why. Okay, so here's the actual fun part. Is that large enough? I hope it is. Can most people read that? This is an 80 character, or this is 80 characters wide on my screen. So is this actually legible? Yes? Excellent. All right, we're gonna give this a shot because there are a couple things that I want to actually show you. So, first thing we're going to do is import logging, right? So now we have our logging module. We have the base set of assumptions that it's made about us. And so if we want to set it up like we did last time, then that should be that one. And this is what was on that last slide. This is the ASC time, level name, and message as our basic format. So if we set this, then the important thing to remember here for the logging module, especially as you're playing around with this in the console, is that as soon as we send any kind of message, as soon as we log a message with any level of severity, our settings will get locked in. And there are ways to change it, but they're horribly complicated and way beyond the scope of this. So you actually have to exit the interpreter and restart it every time you want to change your settings after you send a message, and it's really irritating. But for this, if we do, for example, logging.warning that, then we get our handy-dandy timestamp, our severity level, and our actual message, and a pop-up that it really wants me to know that my VPN has been disconnected. So this is way more useful than what we had, right? This is like so much more information, and we didn't really even have to change anything. We added 4 lines, and it's only 4 lines because I needed it to fit on the screen. So this is a great start. Like, we've made so much progress, and we can go even further. So there was an aside that I wanted to make there, and I don't remember what it was. So we're going to exit and reset and Python. So now what we're going to do is import logging, clearly, because that's important. And we're going to add in a new variable to what our format is actually expecting, which should be that. Now what we've done is just for character line length reasons, we've taken out the timestamp, although you can totally keep that in if you want to, and in fact mine do. We've moved level name over to the back, and we've introduced a new one called func name. You'll notice that this is also in camel case, whereas level name is all lowercase, because they can. I don't know, like we had so many opportunities to fix this, it pains me. I know, right? Okay, and this is why people hate working with this. As long as you get it set up correctly the first time, you never have to think about it again. That's the important part. So anyways, we're going to change up the format a little bit. We're going to add in func name into our formatting. So now we actually have to do the basic config part, which is logging.basicconfig, which is not spelled that way. We're going to do level equals 20 because I'm lazy, and that's info. And we're going to do format equals format. Okay, so we have our basic config that is now locked in. And let's send a thing. So if we do logging.info, because now we should be able to see info messages now, we'll just throw in a random string there, and now we get info module and our message string, which in this case is quir. So those of you who are familiar with logging know where I'm going with this, but I promise you this is pretty cool. So right now this is not very useful to us because we're running it in root. We're not running it in a function or anything like that. So if we put, for example, if we put this format inside of a function, let's do a thing that explodes. And we do logging.critical. I exploded. Okay, so now we have a function that we can run that actually triggers a logging call. If we do this, if we run this, so thing that explodes, and we actually call it, now we get our level, we get the name of the function that called the logging call, which is incredibly awesome. And we have our actual message that we sent, which of course the message that we sent can be formatted with whatever data we want to actually send. But now, if we put all of that together, which I'm not going to do because I'm pretty much out of time, is we can put in a timestamp. We have the level that we want we need to know, because that's kind of important. We have the place that actually exploded, the function that triggered that call, and we have the message. And with all of that combined, now you can do some pretty heavy logging inside of the console. Or you can route it to a file or anything like that with the file handler. I found out while I was researching this that you can actually, there's a handler for making HTTP post calls of logging, of standard logging events, which I had no idea. That's like so cool. It blew my mind. So that's all I've got. I will have my slides up on the IndyPy GitHub here in a bit, and I will be available for questions afterwards. So thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.